finishing seating. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on these blessed last 10 days of Ramadan, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen, to make our portion abundant from the good that descends in these last 10 days, from the mercy that descends in these last 10 days, from the blessings that descend in these last 10 days, from the divine gifts that descend in these last 10 days, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. May Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala bless us through the blessing of our shuyukh, inshallah, to be able to experience these last 10 days the way that the true people of Ramadan, the Ahlul Ramadan, Allah's special creation, experience them. Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. We'll just take another page of this blessed book, Sifat Ahlillah. These are the traits of the people of Allah. And again, these are taken from verses in the Quran. So, verse 223, that hum alladhina ittaqaw Allah. They are those that have taqwa of Allah. وَعَلِمُوا أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُوهُ. And they have certainty that they're going to meet Him. And if we know that we're going to meet Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll prepare for that meeting. It's inconceivable if you think that you have a job interview for a very high position, or you're going to meet a celebrity or CEO of some company, or you have a special guest coming, that you're not going to prepare for the meeting. So what then should be our degree of preparation for the meeting with the only one who's really important that we prepare to meet, which is Allah Jalla Jalaluh. هُمَّ الَّذِينَ لَمْ يَتَعَدَّوْا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, based upon verse number 229, is that they are those who don't exceed the boundaries of Allah. There are set limits. And if you look at the total number of things that Allah Ta'ala has decreed to be forbidden, there are only a few, compared to the vast majority of things which are within the realm of permissibility. And this shows the vile nature of the nafs. There's only a few things that are impermissible. But the nafs just wants what it wants when it wants it, even if it's from these few things. There's so many different alternatives, but the nafs has to have this. So this is why the traits of the people of Allah is that they do not transgress the boundaries that Allah Ta'ala has set. They stay within the boundaries. Based upon verse number 232, هُمَّ الَّذِينَ لَمْ يَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا. They are those who do not take the revelations of Allah as a joke or in jest. They don't think that they're just a joke, or that, let alone mock them, is that Allah Ta'ala revealed the Quran in truth, so that they take it seriously. And they understand is that their eternal salvation is based upon how we implement these verses. وَذَكَرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِمْ. And this is the affair of the believers. They mention the blessing of Allah Ta'ala upon them. In the hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبْ. Allah loves to see the trace of the blessing on His servant. And Surah Al-Duha ends, but in terms of that, as for the blessings of your Lord, proclaim them. It's called at-tahaddith bi ni'matillah. We should thank Allah Ta'ala and openly show gratitude for so many of His blessings, subhanahu wa ta'ala. هُمَّ الَّذِينَ عَلِمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Based upon verse 235 of Surah Al-Baqarah, they are those who know with absolute certainty that Allah Ta'ala knows that which is in their own selves, yani that which is inside of them, that which is in their hearts. Allah knows what is in our own. So normally is that people have inner speech, and people could be that chattering inside about all different types of things. They're physically present somewhere, but their chatter is drifting them. They're actually on the other side of the earth with their chatter, or they're at home in their chatter, or they're somewhere else in a restaurant with their chatter, or they're doing something else with their chatter. And the awliya used to consider the internal chatter and even reflection upon even good things in something like your prayer to be waswasa of shaitan. So there's one of the awliya that complained about having waswasa. They said, are you thinking about things of this world? And he said, for me to be pierced with spears will be more beloved to me than to think about things of the world during prayer. He said, is that I started to think about other things that pertain to the hereafter, as opposed to focusing on the invocation, the position I'm in prayer. SubhanAllah. And so, is that the people of Allah are those that are aware that Allah Ta'ala knows that which is transpiring inside of them. And Allah Ta'ala knows our thoughts. He knows our innermost secrets. He knows everything about us completely. So this is why لا ملجأ ولا منجأ من الله إلا إليه. There's no safety and there's no refuge from Allah except to Allah. Everything else and everyone else that we fear, we run away from. But when we fear Allah, we run to Him. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we seek refuge in His mu'afa min His uquba, and in His rida min His sakhat. And Allah Ta'ala, the only place that we have to go is to Him Subhanahu wa ta'ala. هم الذين عفوا ولم ينسوا الفضل بينهم. They are those who pardon and they don't forget the fadl that was done for them. هم الذين حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقاموا لله قانتين. And that those that preserve their prayers. So on one hand there's iqama and then there's muhafadha. There are those who preserve their prayers when they're at home, when they're traveling, in Ramadan, outside of Ramadan, in all circumstances. They preserve their prayers. And especially as-salat al-wusta, the middle prayer. And the ulama differ about which prayer that is. And they stand to Allah Ta'ala in humble submission. وَقَامُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ هم الذين أقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا هم الذين أيقنوا بأنه كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. And they are those that have absolute certainty that how many small parties have vanquished large parties by the permission of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And Ustad Amjad was mentioning that recently. And when we rely upon Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and we recognize is that if we rely upon ourselves, Allah will leave us to the means. So then the better of the two means wins. But if we rely upon Allah and we enter into any affair through Allah, then we're not left to ourselves. That's the secret. We don't want to be left to ourselves. We don't rely upon Allah, we'll be left to ourselves. And then it's means versus means. But if we rely upon Allah, then even if we're vastly outnumbered, or that we are vastly unprepared, or vastly out-resourced, or vastly, or whatever it is you want to say, is that Allah will help you. And that's what we want, is to actualize our servitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. This is the essence of the entire matter. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bless us to put His book, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, into practice in a way that is pleasing to Him. Ya Dhal Jalali wal Ikram. So we'll continue our reading of this blessed book of Imam Nawawi, At-Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Quran, translated by, this is the book of Imam Nawawi, translated by Sheikh Musa Ferber, Etiquette with the Quran. And we have reached the subchapter on teaching in order of arrival. Tfaddal.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We are reading from Etiquette with the Quran, التبيان في آداب حملة القرآن by Imam Abu Zakaria Yahya Nawawi رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. We are in chapter 4 on page 19, teaching in order of arrival. When there are many students, the teacher gives precedence in instructing his students according to the order in which they arrive. If the first student approves that another be given precedence, it is duly given. He should show them joy and a cheerful face. He should inquire about their circumstances and ask about someone who is absent. Students with unsound intentions.
Okay, so it's a very short section, and he teaches us something here about teaching students in accordance to the order in which they arrive. Now, someone might think about the way that we study here, the fact that we have 5 periods of the day from 8:30 to 3:30 on a normal day and so forth. It's very common in the Muslim world still to this day where there will be a sheikh who's freed up to teach. And he has that many different types of students, all of whom are reading with him various subjects. And the adab is that you read according to the order in which you arrive. And I remember that friends that used to say that they used to try to go very early when they were in Syria studying with the likes of Sheikh Adib al-Kalas in order to be able to read with him first. But this also is the other benefit, is that oftentimes knowledge was open. And this is definitely the way in Mauritania, where it was a different way of instruction, is that when you go read your loh, which is your wooden board, where you write your lesson that you're going to memorize and study, is that you would go and you in the order of your arrival. Now, sometimes there would be a senior student that people would want to prefer, and if the other students are okay with that, then it's perfectly fine for them to give preference to that student. But then you also get the benefit on any given day. If you sit around the sheikh for 30 minutes to an hour and a half, you're hearing multiple texts that are being read that are not yours. So you're hearing something from grammar, you're hearing something from fiqh, you're hearing something from a book related to the Quran, hakada. So you're getting all of these other beneficial meanings in addition to what it is that you're learning. And likewise, if you have gone to read with the sheikh a certain book, as people before you or after you and you hang around, then you also get to benefit from the books that they are reading. So if it's instructions taking place in this particular way, this is the meaning there. But you see how important this is. This is what we need. We need people of knowledge. Our masajid should be filled with people of learning. And then we need to revive the studying of sacred knowledge. Is that this is stagnant in a place like the United States of America. If you look at the number of mosques in a place, I'm just speaking about the US in our context. And you could add to that Canada, you could add to that Latin America and other places in the Muslim world as well. But the point here is that in every masjid we should have circles of learning, where there's young people learning, there's people that are a little bit older who are learning, there's older people who continue to learn, in just circles of knowledge, it's almost deemed to be something weird. And masajid want control, where they actually don't even want certain people to come in to teach in this type of thing. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Is that this needs to be revived. And there should be an array of different topics and subjects studied. And this was the beauty of Islamic learning, is that oftentimes the school was very close to the souk. This is definitely the place that I've seen in Syria. This is definitely the place if you go to a place like Cairo and many other places. You did have their schools on the outskirts, but oftentimes the schools, even in Tarim, it was right in the middle of the souk. In other words, is that it was accessible and the classes were open. And you could, what we would call, audit a class easily. You come in and benefit. And even in Don Mustafa, there was classes between especially Maghrib and Isha that were open to everybody. So everybody can come in to learn. And this is a beautiful thing, and this is what we need to revive, insha'Allah ta'ala. And then he should show them joy in a cheerful face. So imagine if your teacher was constantly frowning and he was upset all the time. And la hawla wa la quwwata, you'd be like, man, I don't know if I want to go study today. But if you think about the true people of Allah, and how much you enjoy to be in their presence, and that because they're following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, man khalatahu ma'rifatan ahab. Whoever spent time with the Prophet ﷺ and came to know him, came to love him. And the true shuyukh, this is how they are. When you sit with them, when you come close to them, is that you come to love them because of their beautiful, uplifting presence that encourages you to be the very best that you can. And this is the goal of the sheikh, is to help you reach your individual potential. We have Adamic potential in general that all human beings share. But then within the broader that understanding of Adamic potential, you and I have our own unique individual potential. And this is the secret of attaining the rida of Allah, is for us to use our God-given gifts for the sake of Allah Ta'ala in every way possible, and to maximize our own specific potential. And if we do that, we can attain the rida of Allah. And then after that, there's degrees. And those degrees are from the fadl of Allah. But every human being has the potential to achieve the good pleasure of Allah. It's possible for every human being if they believe and then take the path and then that are successful in doing that. And then the nature of the teacher is he should inquire about their circumstances. In Arabic, وَيَتَفَقَّدَ أَحْوَالُهُمْ. And some of this procedures, well, he should look after them and ask about them and to be concerned about them, and to, that as he said before, treat them as if we would treat our own children. We don't just let our children do anything and everything it is that they do, even if they get older, even if they're married, even if they're going to move outside the house. You're still going to look after them. You're still going to check up on them. And you're still going to want to make sure that everything is going good for them. And then, and ask about someone who is absent. So where is so-and-so? Is everything okay? Do they need anything? And so forth. And then the subsection on students with unsound intentions.
Students with unsound intentions. The scholars, God be pleased with them, said, "Do not deny anyone instruction because of unsound intentions." Sufyan al-Thawri and others have said, "Their seeking knowledge is intention in itself." They said, "We sought knowledge for reasons other than God, but the knowledge refused to be for other than the sake of God," meaning that its purpose be for Allah Most High.
No. And so in Arabic, قال العلماء ولا يمتنع من تعليم أحد لكونه غير صحيح النية. فقد قال سفيان وغيره طلبهم للعلم نية. Okay. And so that this is very important. Now, if you open up the Bidayat al-Hidayah of Imam al-Ghazali, he that chides and that lambasts the teacher who is teaching someone who's not sincere. And he says that this is like selling weapons to a highway robber, which in Sharia, if you know someone's going to go commit a violent act, it's haram for you to sell them a weapon or to assist them in any way to help commit a violent act. And that, so these are not in contradiction. What Imam al-Ghazali is talking about are the people that you absolutely know. So if someone said that, look, I want to come to Al-Maqasid and learn Arabic so I could go work for the CIA or the State Department or something like that, be like, right? We don't have a degree program. This is the beautiful thing about it being an unaccredited program, that you're going to want people who are sincere. You want people who are sincere. And I know a lot of people are moving towards accreditation. I know a lot of people want to get accreditation, but our teachers, they've tried and tried and tried to convince them to get an accredited program for the students going back to Singapore and to Malaysia, especially in places like this, and other places in East Africa and Southeast Asia and other places in the world, because of the difficulty of going back. And then but the whole point is they see things that we don't see. We don't enter into deen for career. We don't think of it like that. This is not the way that this works. We enter in to learn the deen for our own personal transformation, to attain that gaze upon the noble countenance of Allah, and to fulfill the covenant that we've taken with our Lord in the pre-earthly realm, and to enter into paradise. This is why we seek the deen, and to serve the deen while we're alive, and to follow the sunnah of the Prophet, disseminate the prophetic inheritance. This is why we go learn the deen. And it's a fitna for people when they know that they can get something worldly out of it, right? Where they get a degree and then move on and to get hakada. When it comes to deen, we need to be very wary. And on top of all of that, is that who are these accrediting bodies to accredit the greatest accreditation that program in history, which is the ijazah system. Right? And there are that Jews and Christians who refuse to let accrediting bodies to accredit their programs. So who are you to accredit us when we know what we are doing more than you know how to set the standards for us to be accredited regarding? Anyhow, the point here is that I'm not necessarily against all institutions getting accreditation, but you want people who are sincere. So if someone wants to come and clearly they have an unsound intention, that person, you don't teach. No, the legality and all of that, that's another issue. But the whole point is that you want people who are sincere. You want people who are sincere. What he's speaking about here is that people that might have mixed intentions. And you can tell there's good in them, but they're not in a pure state yet. When it comes to people like that you still teach them. You don't just because not that talabahum lil-ilm niyya, them seeking knowledge is a type of intention. And then there's been multiple occasions where people have said talabna al-ilm li ghayri Allah ta'ala. We sought knowledge for other than the sake of Allah ta'ala. And sometimes this happens, right? Where people, when you are that freed up from your worldly life to seek knowledge, it's nice and it's comfortable to have a stipend, have a place to stay, to have what you need to have food. It's nice. And then people start going, I don't want to go back to work. I just kind of want to, I don't really want to work too hard at studying, but I don't also want to go back to work. Let me just kind of like hang around and just kind of do this study thing a little bit more so I can run away from the real world that's out there and not have to pay rent and to get a job or go to school or to learn some skills or something. No. That people who should be freed up to learn should be those who are taking it seriously and that want to dedicate their lives to this, not just to hang around and that they want to just kind of avoid that worldly responsibilities. No, that's not why. So that's an ulterior motive, and that's very easy to slip in, especially after you feel the beauty of what it's like to be a student of knowledge for a year and you're freed up and being in a good environment and praying your prayers on time and so forth. But that's not, we don't seek knowledge for that reason. We seek knowledge because knowledge needs to be sought for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. But it's a purificatory process that happens. When you study sacred knowledge, it purifies you. فَأَبَى أَن يَكُونْ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. So if you have the right environment and the right teachers and you're learning the right sciences, it will purify you. And Imam al-Ghazali is one of those who said the statement. Imam al-Ghazali had a very special father. His name Al-Ghazali. It's either Al-Ghazali or Al-Ghazali. They say it's Ghazal because this is one of the forms in Arabic, the fa'ad form for trades. So khayyat is a tailor. Right? A banna is like a mason, someone who's in construction. And so forth and so on. A sabagh is someone who like dyes, that tans hides and things like that. And so forth and so on. So that a ghazal is someone who spins wool. So you basically take things like wool and you spin it into thread that they can then be used to like sew garments and things like that. So some say this was the profession of his family. And others say without the shadda on the ghazal, on the zay, is that he's ghazali mansub ila qarya, to a village called a ghazala. It was actually a village. So there's the ikhtilaf of the ulama. Nevertheless, his father was a righteous man. And he would attend the gatherings of the fuqaha. And he'd say, oh Allah, bless me with a son who's a faqih. He's a great scholar of fiqh. And then he would attend the gatherings of the wa'adh, of the gatherings where people were giving admonition and, helping people. And he said, oh Allah, bless me with a son who's a wa'adh, that speak in a way that brings the best out of people. So then Allah Ta'ala answered his du'as and gave him Imam Ghazali and his brother, Imam Ahmad, who people don't realize that he was also a great scholar and that he was a great poet in Persian and that he was one of those who introduced the concept of ishq, passionate love for Allah Ta'ala, into Persian poetry. And he's the one who also assumed the position of Imam Ghazali when he had left the Nizamiya. So most people know Imam Ghazali, they don't know his brother. His brother was also a scholar and was known to be a very powerful wa'id, that hearts would tremble and benefit immensely when he spoke. And so Imam Ghazali's father passed away when both of them were really young. And so he left a small inheritance only, and he had a Sufi friend of his that took care of them. And he took care of them to the extent that he could, but then he himself was mujarrad. He didn't have a steady income, so he reached a point where he couldn't take care of them. So he sent them to the madrasa because they had nowhere else to go. In those days that there were awqaf and endowments where they would accept students and so forth. So Imam Ghazali, that initially went to the madrasa because he had nowhere else to go, and his brother. And so he said that I sought knowledge at first for other than the sake of Allah. I mean, I had nowhere else to go, so I was just sent to the madrasa. But then that knowledge is so beautiful, sacred knowledge, and it's so purificatory, is that it refused to be sought for any other sake than the sake of Allah, for any other reason other than the sake of Allah. And then he becomes Imam Ghazali. So it's important to find that balance. Is that on one hand, it's just the whole thing's not just about hanging around. We have work to do. And if people are not going to live a life of dedicating themselves to serving the religion full time, don't think of it as a career, but serving and sacrificing everything for your life, then learn for a year, 2 years, and then boom, get back to the means, that get a job, learn a vocation, make money, take care of your family, that support the Muslim community, teach on the side, do the da'wah on the side, and so forth, and that live a life of da'wah still, but in a slightly different way. But you don't want to be in limbo between this or this. This is what's called batala, idleness, and it's very harmful. Is that either choose this way and don't worry about anything in relation to the world. Do whatever it is you need to do. Dedicate yourself to it. Allah will take care of you. There's a takafful khas. Allah Ta'ala has taken care of the risk and the sustenance of everybody, but especially the student of knowledge. And then even in qiyasan ala dhalik, and also is that the one who's freed himself up to serve the da'wah of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And having said all of that, that it is perfectly legitimate, and there's many of the greatest of the awliya and the salihin who had that some form of commerce or some way to take care of things on the side in order to free themselves up so they don't need to ask anyone for anything, where they're taking care of their worldly affairs, living simply, and they're giving da'wah in that as well, just as they then in their free time are also giving da'wah that and beyond that. So this is also a model. This is harder in the context of the United States of America, where it's a little bit more like kind of all or nothing, but there are some people who that are still able to do that. And that's actually the better way, is it to not be in need of anyone to give you a stipend to free yourself up from da'wah. That's actually the best way to be, if Allah Ta'ala facilitates that for you. So the point here is that this is the nature of this path, is that we need to be sincere. But what Imam Nawawi is teaching us here is that وَلَا يَمْتَنَ مِنْ تَعْلِيمِ أَحَدٍ, is that you should not refuse to teach someone if you think that they're one of these people that are not just outright doing it for totally other than the sake of Allah, that could be what they learn could harm Muslims. If it's not that, where they have mixed intentions based upon what was mentioned, still teach this person, because it's going to impact them over time and he'll become sincere bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Not fidgeting during recitation. During recitation, the teacher should not fidget with his hands, and he should keep his eyes from needlessly glancing about. He sits while having ritual purification, facing the Qibla, the direction of prayer, and he sits with dignity, his clothes white and clean. When he reaches the place in which he sits to teach, he prays 2 rak'ahs before actually sitting, whether or not the location is a mosque. This practice is more emphatic if it is a mosque, since it is offensive to sit in a mosque before praying. Also, he may sit cross-legged. Abu Bakr as-Sajistani relates with his chain of transmission that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would have people recite to him in the mosque while kneeling.
Okay. Allahumma salli alayhi. So this is about the adab of the mu'allim. Now this more relates to the teacher. وَيَصُونِ يَدَهِ فِي حَالِ إِقْرَاءٍ عَنِ الْعَبَثِ. So the nature of the teacher is he shouldn't be fidgeting about, and he should keep his eyes from needlessly glancing about. So this is a part of spiritual maturity, is that there's focus. And if there's things that you need to be aware of, you have to look around to be aware of certain things. And sometimes it's important to notice, did someone come in? And if that person's an older person, that person needs to be respected. That person should be offered choice seating. And that maybe there's no chairs left, someone needs a chair. Ideally, people at the front of the majlis don't have to do that. Is that hopefully people by now realize that and they're aware of it, right? But it doesn't mean, though, that we are just looking for anything like from a frivolous type perspective. No, it's purposeful if we're looking, is the whole point. And he should keep his eyes from needlessly glancing about. He sits while having ritual purification. And so this is the emphasized etiquette, is that a teacher, as well as a student, should always be in a state of wudu when one is teaching and when one is learning. And he says here, mustaqbil al-qiblati. And so the way that our teachers tend to teach is that the students are facing the qibla, and then that they have their back to the qibla facing the students. Okay? But it also is possible that if you're in a building, that there's different halaqat taking place in different places where teachers are sitting in different directions. If the teacher can sit facing the qibla, then that is a good thing. But sometimes there'll be situations where he'll have his back to the qibla and the students will have their face to the qibla. وَيَجْلِسْ بِوَقَارٍ, and he sits with dignity. Now, here meaning is that he has a presence, and that ideally that teacher's heart is one that's in a state of muraqabah, recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees him, and he feels the responsibility of the task at hand, which is teaching people their deen. Nothing is more serious and important than teaching people their deen. So think about how much concentration someone would have if they're performing a surgery where someone's life is on the line, or that someone is doing something that if they don't do this right, that someone could actually get injured or something like that. Think about the concentration. And the most that's going to happen if you don't build the building right or you mess up in the surgery is that someone's life goes. We don't want that to happen. But if you lose your physical life, yani, if you're in the good state, you'll have the eternal life. But when it comes to religion, is that if you make a mistake when you're teaching and you say the wrong thing, or it could be someone's hereafter that is at stake. It's very serious. So it requires presence. And sometimes the great teachers, even if they're tired, even if they have headaches, even if they're sick, they oftentimes still go. And that they seek a shifa through teaching. And that's the way of azima. But then sometimes if people aren't really at that level, sometimes it's better for them actually to rest and have someone take their place if that's not their station, so that you don't make mistakes that when you're teaching. The point here is that there's a way of being. And then even with our clothes, that the clothes should be that clean and that properly arranged, and that he recommended here, praying 2 rak'ahs if one is able to do so. Now, this technically is a musalla, so there's no tahiyyat al-masjid. So if you come in and the imam is giving the khutbah, is that there's no tahiyyat al-masjid, you sit down immediately in the musalla. If you're in a masjid and you come in, then in the Shafi school, you pray 2 rak'ahs as quickly as you can possibly pray them. And you only recite the Fatiha, no surah. And you don't do any of the other sunnahs, because you're supposed to be listening to the fard of the 2 sermons of the khutbah. So you pray as quick as you possibly can, and then you listen. But here, I don't know how widespread of knowledge is, and we should probably clarify that. You don't do tahiyyat al-masjid here. Now, that you can still do sunnahs, the rawatib, before the prayers and the after prayers, based upon which prayer it is. But if it was a masjid, is that especially in a masjid, it's makruh not to pray tahiyyat al-masjid. And the only exception there is after Salat al-Fajr and after Salat al-Asr. Now, technically, even in the Shafi school, you have what's called a sabab mutaqaddam and a sabab muta'akhar. That the only prayers that are impermissible to pray at those times, and there's 5 times, and 2 are associated, 2 are associated time, 3 are associated to 3 are associated time, 2 are associated to prayers, is that it's nafila mutlaqa, and then that which has a sabab muta'akhir. So here the sabab is mutaqaddam. It comes before. Why? You entered into the mosque. So technically speaking, it's permissible late asr. If you enter into a mosque, it's still sunnah to pray, even if Maghrib has not entered, the tahiyyat al-masjid in the Shafi school. The scholars from Hadramaut tended to differ on that, and that preferred not to do that. That's just their opinion and their inclination towards that position. But in the Shafi school, that's the position. وَيَجْلِسُ مُتَرَبِّعًا إِنْ شَاءَ أَوْ غَيْرْ مُتَرَبِّعٍ. So mutarabbi' is how most of you are sitting, cross-legged. Unfortunately, because of my knee, I'm unable to sit like that. Inshallah, soon I'll be back to normal. But even sitting mutarabbi'an, this is not the way people used to sit. Is that students used to sit the way that you have in the description of Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, learning from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where they would actually sit on your knees. So just sit on your knees so people can see what I'm talking about. Like hakada, right? The sister at the back can't see it, but essentially it's just kind of sitting that on your knees. That's the way that students actually used to sit. Now imagine sitting like that for an hour or an hour and a half, right? But at very least is that students should sit either in the cross-legged position, or they should sit in this position, or like in the tawarruk or the iftirah position. Is that they used to prevent us in Nana Mustafa, if you're under 40, you were not allowed to lean on anything, right? And unfortunately, nowadays we see children over here leaning on these things like this. Parents should tell your kids, sit properly. Teach your kids to sit properly. Practice at home. Practice at home. And if it's too much for them to sit through a majlis and they're running around outside, then come to them with the majlis for 20 minutes. And then once they can't sit anymore, go home. So they know you're going to leave if they don't sit still. And then next majlis, do 25 minutes. And you'll find, because they know if you do it 3 or 4 times that you're going to leave, guess what? They're going to sit. Right? There's molids in Tareem for 2.5 hours where 4 and 5-year-olds are sitting without moving. Now, part of it is they don't have this ADHD-induced stuff from all of the devices and stuff like that here, but increasingly it's coming there. But this is the parents' responsibility to teach children how to sit and sit still and not fidget. And if they tell you that they're so thirsty, they're fooling you, right? Bring a bottle of water then, because then they're thirsty and then they go hang out with their friends out there, right? Or they got to use the bathroom. You didn't use the bathroom before you came, right? Don't fall victim to these tricks. This is whether they're sitting with the father or they're sitting with the mother. Teach the child. It's the parent's responsibility, and it's for their own benefit. This is about manners, and that for those that don't think our society had this, not that I agree with everything in this book. There's a book that George Washington has on the rules of civility. I mean, there's some stuff in there that we wouldn't follow, but it's just really interesting to note how even in a place like the United States of America, you rewind that 50 years, not even 50 years. I remember from my grandparents' generation, there was protocol. When you ate, how you sat, when you spoke, how you addressed someone, right? There was ways of speaking to people. You don't just speak to anyone, everyone. Like there was rules of behavior. And nowadays it's like, yep, right? I can't stand when my kids send me that, what are they even called? Emojis. What are when you like abbreviations? What are they called? What are those called? I forgot. Huh? No, like LOL. And I just like, it's like, don't send me, like spell it out, right? Don't send me you, love, LOU, love, LOV, or this type of thing. Like, come on. There has to be a degree of formality, right? If you're the parent. And that, anyhow, why did we get into this topic? What were we talking about? I got just sidetracked. We got all of that because about adab. But these things are really important. I'm really serious. These things are important because adab is going very quickly. And when Sayyid Muhammad Naqib al-Attas, may Allah Ta'ala protect him, preserve him, he was asked by Sheikh Hamza what he felt the biggest crisis in the world was. And he said, loss of adab. And not just in terms of how we sit, adab comprehensively, which is essentially about doing the right thing at the right time in the right way, putting things in the right place. In the modern world, there's a lot of knowledge, but there's a lack of wisdom. There's been an explosion of knowledge in the age of information, but there's a total lack of wisdom. And we're destroying ourselves, and we're destroying and harming other people. And our deen puts everything in its proper place, and this is why that these etiquettes are so important. And teach yourself these etiquettes while you have a training ground. And once you do it, you'll start to realize the benefit of it. And it's a little bit hard at first. And it doesn't mean that we are mean to people or hit them or beat them. That's not what I'm talking about. But discipline. And I like the way that Dr. Sachs expressed his core principle of parenting. Lovingly strict. Lovingly strict. There has to be boundaries. It's in the children's and students' own benefit. If there's no boundaries, this is precisely the problem of the modern world. You can become a PhD and you're a complete profligate and you're a horrible person. And then it's like you're dangerous at that point, especially if you're smart. You're even more dangerous. The smarter you are, the more dangerous you are. And the higher the institution that's you graduate, the more dangerous you are. So everything has to be put in its proper place. Right? Sorry, let's just finish this off. Allahumma salli ala alihi. And then he mentions a narration here that Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the great companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, kana yuqra an-nas. Remember we said the difference between aqra'a and qara'a? Aqra' yuqra' is to teach. The muqra' is the one who teaches. The qari' is the one who recites. Man kana yuqra an-nas fi masjid jathiyan ala rukbatayhi. So he used to sit like this, that on his knees, that teaching out of the adab of ilm. And subhanallah. And I remember when I became Muslim with Sheikh Khatri wal Bayba, I remember that was one of the things that just took me, like when I saw him, subhanallah. He just had such a presence. It was such a regal and noble presence. Here I am, this young kid from the Bay Area, and go into the masjid. I know nothing about Islam really, so just the basics. And you just encounter this incredibly that nurani and radiant individual who was wearing a beautiful blue dara'a, the beautiful traditional Mauritanian dress, and a turban, and beautiful, that full beard. And just the way he was just exuding the izzah of Islam. It's just like, la ilaha illallah, what is that, yani? And then, to sit with them and just to learn from these people, subhanallah, la ilaha illallah. And just to learn how to be a human being. And then beyond that, just everything that you need. This was one of the most amazing things, how Islam has spread so far and wide. And I remember asking questions to our teachers in Hadramaut, that questions that might even have asked other teachers in different places in the world. And then how you ask a people that they were Bedouins for much of their life, is that how you get the same answer in the middle of the Saharan desert, outside of a major civilization, that you get in places of high civilization. What is this? What an amazing deen this is. Is that if you learn the sunnah, wherever you are, it's perfectly applicable to the simplest of people, to the most sophisticated people, to the most rural or even desert-like situation that's as remote as can be, to the midst of one of the biggest cities in the world at the height of civilization. Islam told our God, this is only possible because this is the religion of our time. And the more and more people realize this, the more and more that they're going to come to this religion. And sometimes people can't articulate what I'm saying, but this is how they feel, and this is why they actually become Muslim. And that people will start to realize is that we respect people of other faiths, but there is no other faith on the face of this earth that can actually really withstand the onslaught of modernity. They don't have it within the faith, one, because it wasn't meant to be practiced in this time, because this is the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And two, that it's been distorted from the original teachings of their prophets. So there's a twofold reason, you could probably add more to that, why it's not going to be able to withstand. Is that our Prophet ﷺ is the only universal prophet. And it's just amazing how he brought a universal deen that at a time long before people had ever talked about a globalized world. It's amazing. It's one of the proofs of Islam, among the many, many proofs. And so everything that we need is there. And what we need to do is to learn. And this is why we're reading a book like this, is that this is the secret, is that you and I become refined individuals. And it starts with the outward etiquettes, and we combine to that the inner etiquettes, and he's been giving us both, and that we learn the sacred law. And we realize that what knowledge is most important? Revelation. What knowledge is sought for in and of itself? We're talking about the story of Sayyidina Musa in Khidr. Is that knowledge directly from the presence of Allah. And then we learn sacred knowledge because this is the greatest means to draw near to Allah. And then put that knowledge into practice, into worship Allah. And then we also that expand into all different other types of knowledge. We're a civilization of knowledge. There's nothing wrong with learning all different other types of knowledge as long as they have a degree of permissibility. But we root all of that knowledge in revelation. The rational sciences, experimental sciences, and so forth and so on. And this is the, but you can't do that actively if you're not rooted in your deen. You can't do it. Al-hikmatu dhalatul mu'min. Wisdom is the lost property of the believer. They have more right to it. But look what our Prophet said, the mu'min. In other words, is you take that individual piece of knowledge and you bring it into a worldview of tawheed in deen. And sometimes that requires just mere appropriation. It's fairly easy. You take it and then use it. And other times it requires naturalization, where you uproot it from its root and then you bring it in, and then you make sure that it is properly understood with the worldview of our deen. So this is our goal, is to start this process. And this is a long process. It's not something that's easy. This is an intergenerational process. Is that people are just going to make more and more and more and more and more contributions. But the ball's rolling. It's happening right before our eyes. And then, alhamdulillah, we get these instances where you have that waves of people becoming Muslim. And subhanAllah, a lot of the people now become Muslims because of the suffering that is taking place in Palestine. And their sabr and their thabat, despite the most difficult possible circumstances. And we were at that iftar not too long ago with the other imams. And both of people were just contributing to stories. And one of them just said is that I met this lady and that she came, said she wanted to become Muslim. And I asked her, like, what do you know about Islam? And she said, I don't really know much. He said, well, what's your story? She said, I saw what these people were enduring and going through and how they were able to be patient. She said, I realized if whatever they have that's enabling them to remain like that despite these circumstances, I want that. And she didn't even know what it was, but that's what I want. And so she became Muslim. And this is not just one or two people. There's been a lot of people that are like this. Inshallah, the doors are going to open up. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It's going to happen as our Prophet said. It's going to happen, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, by the one whose hand is my soul, is that there will remain that house on earth. And he mentioned all the different types of houses and the way they could be constructed, except that my deen will enter into it. This is a prophecy of the best of creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it's going to happen whether we want it to happen or whether we don't want it to happen. What Muslim wouldn't want it to happen? Whether we actively contribute to it or whether we that are doing things to seemingly prevent it. It's going to happen despite us. But really, this is about what can you and I do to be a part of this. We know this is going to happen. It's either going to be with us or despite us. So why not take part in some way? And then there'll be degrees to which people that take part in this. And then when we return to Allah Ta'ala, and some people, that after the ball is really, some people kind of jump on board a little bit later. Some people kind of jump on board much later. Some people jump on board at the last moment. It's like it's like the bell curve of, what do they call it? Like when people accepting technology. You have like the first few percent are the ones who actually develop the technology. And what is it? The first 16% are the ones that like the first users that like take the risk. And then you have like another like 33%. I could be getting the numbers wrong, so don't quote me on it. Then you get like the next 33% of those after that initial 16%, like, oh yeah, I'm going to adopt this. And then the other 33% are like only kind of get on board later after the tide is shifted. And then the last 16 are the ones that like don't ever get rid of like their previous phone except because the software doesn't work anymore, right? And then they have to get something new. And the heck of that, right? Let's jump on board early to take part in this khair that we want to receive, subhanAllah. The ones who became Muslim after the Fath were not like the ones who became Muslim before the Fath. All of them, Allah Ta'ala is going to get, but the people that sacrifice early on, the people who are with the Prophet ﷺ, oh, this is different. May Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq and bless us in all of our affairs. Ya Arhamar Rahimeen.
سلام سلام كمسك الختام عليكم حيبة بنايا كرام ومن ذكرهم أنسنا في الظلام ونور لنا بين هذا الأنام سكنتم فؤادي ورب العباد وأنتم مناتي وأقصى المراد فهل تسعدوني بصفو الوداد وهل تمنحوني شريف المقام أنا عبدكم يا أهيل الوفاء وفي قربكم صرف همي والشفاء مرهمي والشفاء فلا تسقموني بطول الجفا ومنوا بوصل ولو في المنام أموت وأحيا على حبكم وذلي لديكم وعزي بكم وراحة روحي رجاء قربكم وعزمي وقصدي إليكم دوام فلا عشت إن كان قلبي سكن إلى البعد عن أهله والوطن ومن حبهم في الحشا قد قطن وخمر مني جميع العظام إذا مر بالقلب ذكر الحبيب ووادي العقيق وذاك الكثيب يميل كمايل القضيب الرطيب ويهتز من شوقه والغرام أموت وما زرت ذاك الفناء
وتلك الخيام وفيها المنى، ولم أدن يوما مع من دنا للأثم المحيا وشرب المدام. لئن كان هذا فيا غربتي ويا طول حزني ويا كربتي، ولي حسن ظن به قربي بربي وحسبي به يا غلام. عسى الله يشفي غليل الصدود بوصل الحبايب وفك القيود. عسى الله يشفي غليل الصدود بوصل الحبايب، بوصل الحبايب وفك القيود. فربي رحيم كريم ودود يجود على من يشاء بالمرام، والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. علمتنا ربي علمنا الذي ينفعنا، ربي فقهنا وفقه أهلنا وقربة لنا في ديننا مع أهل القطر أنثى وذا. ربي وفقنا ووفقهم لما ترتضي قولا وفعلا كرما، وارزق الكل حلالا دائم وأخل لنا اتقيا علما، نحظى بالخير ونكفى كل شر. ربنا واصلح لنا كل شؤون وأقر بالرضا منك العيون، واقضي عنا ربنا كل الديون قبل أن تأتينا رسل المن. واغفر استر أنت أكرم من ستار، وصلاة الله تغشى المصطفى من إلى الحق دعانا بكتاب فيه للناس شفاء، وعلى الآل الكرام شرفاء، وعلى صحب المصابيح الغرار. اللهم اهدنا بهداك واجعلنا ممن يسارع في رضاك، ولا تولنا وليا سواك، ولا تجعلنا ممن خالف أمرك وعصاك. وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اقترفنا، وأننا أشرفنا على لظى أشرفنا، فتب علينا توبة تغسل لكل حوبة، واستر لنا العورات وآمن الروعات، واغفر لوالدينا ربي ومولودينا والأهل والإخوان وسائر الخلان، وكل ذي محبة أو جيرة أو صحبة، والمسلمين أجمع آمين. ربي فضلا وجودا منا لا باكتساب منا، بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول، بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول، بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول. صلى وسلم ربي عليه عد الحبي، وآله وصحبه عداد طش السحب، والحمد للإله في البدء والتناهي، حمدا كثيرا دائم ما هبت النسائم.